Part 1. I never thought I'd be the kind of man to tell a story like this. I used to believe that loyalty and love were enough to keep a marriage strong. That if you were good, if you were kind, if you were the kind of man who took care of his wife and put her first, she would never betray you. But life doesn't work that way, and neither does love. My name is David. I'm 36 years old, and for the past 10 years, I was married to the love of my life, Mary. We met in college, one of those whirlwind romances people dream about. She was beautiful, smart, and had this way of making me feel like the luckiest man in the world. I was never the most handsome guy, but with her by my side, I felt unstoppable. We built a life together, got a nice house in the suburbs, and supported each other through thick and thin. Or so I thought. I work in construction management. It's a good job, pays well, keeps me busy. Mary, on the other hand, is a corporate consultant, always dressed in sharp suits, always with a laptop under her arm. Her job required a lot of travel, a lot of late nights, a lot of meetings with clients. I never questioned it. She was ambitious, driven, and I admired that about her. I thought she was working hard for us, for our future. Then came the little things. The things you don't notice at first, the ones that creep up on you slowly, like a sickness you don't realize you have until it's too late. The extra hours at work. The sudden obsession with her phone. The gym membership she never used before, but now swore she couldn't miss a single day. I told myself I was overthinking it, that marriage changes over time. People grow, and maybe she just needed space. But deep down, something felt wrong. It all started unraveling the day I decided to surprise her at work. She had been pulling late nights, and I thought I'd be a good husband. Bring her dinner, maybe some flowers, remind her that I was thinking about her. When I got to her office, the receptionist gave me a strange look. "She's not here," the young woman said, hesitating slightly. That didn't make sense. She told me she'd be working late. I said, my stomach tightening. The receptionist shrugged, trying to be polite. "She left a while ago. Maybe she had a meeting off-site." I nodded, forcing a smile, but I already knew the truth. The drive home was a blur. My heart pounded. My fingers clenched the steering wheel so tightly they turned white. I told myself there had to be a logical explanation. But when I got home, she wasn't there either. She didn't get home until nearly midnight, hair slightly disheveled, her blouse buttoned wrong. I stared at her, my mind spinning, my mouth dry. "How was work?" I asked, my voice tight. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Exhausting," she said. "Long meetings. You know how it is." I nodded, forcing myself to swallow the lump in my throat. "Yeah, I do." She kissed my cheek and walked past me, heading straight for the shower. That night, I barely slept. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the sound of the water running, wondering if I was crazy. But I wasn't. I knew, deep in my gut, that something was happening. Something that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my wife, my marriage, my life. And I was right. The next morning, I made coffee like I always did. Mary came down the stairs, dressed in a fitted skirt and blazer, her hair pulled back in that sleek ponytail she always wore for work. She kissed my cheek, grabbed her coffee, and thanked me. I watched her, memorizing every detail, every movement. Was she pretending? Had she always been pretending? I needed answers. That day, I left work early. I went to her office again, this time waiting in my car across the street. If she had a late meeting, I would see it. If she had somewhere else to be, I would see that too. Hours passed. Then, just as the sun was starting to set, I saw her. She walked out of the building, laughing, her hand lightly touching the arm of a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, well-dressed, confident. They got into his car together and drove off. I sat there, frozen, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. This was it. The moment that confirmed what I had been too afraid to admit. My wife was cheating on me. Part 2. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, my mind racing in 100 different directions. There she was, my wife, the woman I had loved for over a decade, getting into another man's car, laughing as if she didn't have a husband waiting for her at home. I wanted to believe there was an explanation. Maybe he was a coworker. Maybe it was just a business dinner. Maybe. No, I wasn't going to do this to myself. I wasn't going to be the fool who ignored the truth staring him in the face. I started my car and followed them. My hands were gripping the wheel so tightly I thought my fingers might snap. I wasn't even sure what I planned to do. Would I confront her? Would I wait for her to come home and pretend I hadn't seen anything? My stomach churned as I kept my distance, making sure they never saw me. They pulled up to a high-end hotel downtown. I parked a block away, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might be sick. My fingers trembled as I pulled out my phone and snapped a few pictures. Mary and the man walked through the glass doors, his hand casually resting on the small of her back. That was all I needed to see. I drove home in silence, the weight of my thoughts suffocating me. My mind replayed every moment of our marriage, every sign I had ignored. The late nights, the phone calls she took in the other room, the sudden obsession with going to the gym, the perfume I didn't recognize on her clothes. It had all been right in front of me, and I had refused to see it. When she finally came home that night, I was sitting in the living room, waiting. "Hey, babe," she said, dropping her purse by the door. She didn't look guilty. She didn't act any different. I forced myself to keep my voice calm. "How was work?" She sighed and walked over, pressing a quick kiss to my forehead. "Exhausting. I swear, my boss is going to run me into the ground." I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. "Long meetings." She nodded, not even hesitating. "Yeah, back to back." I barely had time to breathe. A lie. I clenched my jaw, but I said nothing. I wanted to see how far she'd take it. She sat beside me on the couch, kicking off her heels. "You okay? You look tense." Tense? That was one way to put it. I forced a smile. "Just a long day." She gave me a sympathetic look before stretching her legs across my lap. "I get it. But hey, the weekend's coming up. Maybe we should do something, just the two of us." The audacity of it made my skin crawl. I barely slept that night. I lay beside her, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing, wondering how long she had been lying to me. Had she ever loved me? Had I just been some safety net while she chased whatever thrill she was after? My hands itched to grab her phone, to go through her messages, but I knew she would catch on. If I was going to do this, I had to be smart. The next day, while she was in the shower, I did something I never thought I'd do. I installed a tracker on her phone. I felt sick as I did it. This wasn't who I was. I wasn't the kind of man who spied on his wife. But she had turned me into this. I needed the truth, and I wasn't going to get it by asking. That evening, I checked the app. My heart nearly stopped when I saw her location. She wasn't at the office. She wasn't at the gym. She was at the same hotel as the night before. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. There it was, undeniable proof. I spent the next few days gathering everything I could. I checked our phone records, and sure enough, there was a number she had been calling and texting almost daily. I noted the timestamps, the sheer frequency of it. I went through our bank statements and found charges from restaurants and bars I had never been to. She wasn't even trying to hide it. Maybe she thought I was too trusting, too blind to ever suspect her. By the end of the week, I had enough evidence to make my case airtight. The only thing left was the confrontation. But I didn't want a screaming match. I didn't want her to turn this around on me, to gaslight me into thinking I was crazy. I needed to be in control. I made a plan. I invited her to dinner at our favorite restaurant. The place where we had our first anniversary, where she had once told me she wanted to spend forever with me. I wanted to see if she could sit across from me and lie to my face, knowing what I knew. She arrived late, as expected. She looked beautiful, dressed in a sleek black dress, her hair falling in perfect waves. I wondered if she had put in this much effort for him. She leaned in to kiss me, but I turned my head slightly, letting her lips graze my cheek instead. She pulled back, frowning. "Everything okay?" I smiled. "Perfect." We ordered drinks, and I watched her, studying every movement, every expression. She was relaxed, at ease, completely unaware that her world was about to come crashing down. I let her talk for a while, listening to her spin more lies, talk about her day as if she hadn't been in another man's arms hours ago. And then, I pulled out my phone. I placed it on the table, screen facing up, and tapped on the tracker app. Her eyes flicked to the screen, and in an instant, I saw it, the flicker of recognition, the fear that flashed across her face before she quickly masked it. "Mary," I said, my voice calm steady. "Where were you last night?" Her fingers tightened around her wine glass. "What do you mean?" I leaned in slightly, keeping my gaze locked on hers. "I mean, where were you?" "Because you weren't at work." She forced a laugh, but I saw the panic in her eyes. "David, you're being ridiculous." I slid my phone across the table, showing her the screen. "This says otherwise." She paled. And just like that, the web of lies she had spun for months started to unravel. Part 3. For a moment, she didn't move. She just stared at the screen of my phone, her face frozen in a blank expression. Then, slowly, she let out a soft, breathy laugh and shook her head. David, she sighed, pushing her wine glass aside. I can't believe this. You're tracking me now. She was good. I had to give her that. The indignation in her voice was perfect, controlled. But I wasn't falling for it. Not this time. I wouldn't have to track you if you weren't lying to me, I said, keeping my voice calm. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to lose control. She scoffed, crossing her arms. So I can't even go anywhere without you assuming the worst? I leaned forward, placing my elbows on the table. You weren't at work, Mary. She hesitated, just for a second. Then, she exhaled sharply. Fine, she said. I was meeting a friend. A private matter. I tilted my head. A private matter that requires a hotel room? She flinched. A slight movement, barely noticeable. But I saw it. I don't owe you an explanation for every little thing I do, she said, picking up her wine glass and taking a slow sip, as if to steady herself. That's where you're wrong, I said. You're my wife. And I know you're lying. She set her glass down a little too forcefully. You're being paranoid. Honestly, David, I don't even recognize you anymore. There it was, the turn. The way cheaters flip the script, make it about the other person. Make them question their own sanity. I had read about this, and yet, experiencing it firsthand still sent a wave of anger through me. I sighed, pulling my phone back. All right, I said, nodding. You win. She blinked. What? I forced a smile. You're right. I've been acting crazy. Let's just forget about it. Her shoulders relaxed, but I could see the tension still there, just beneath the surface. David, I love you. You have to trust me. I nodded, even though I didn't believe a word she was saying. And just like that, she got away with it. For the moment. A few days passed, and she went back to acting normal. She thought she had smoothed things over. I let her believe it. I played my part, smiling, kissing her goodnight, pretending to let it go. But I didn't stop watching. I didn't stop gathering evidence. Then, fate handed me something I never expected. I was cleaning her car one evening. It wasn't unusual. I often did small things like that, making sure her vehicle was in good shape. It gave me time to think, to be alone with my thoughts. As I vacuumed the passenger seat, my hand brushed against something soft wedged under it. I frowned and pulled it out. A pair of black lace underwear. My stomach turned. I stared at it, my mind racing. I knew Mary's lingerie. I knew every damn piece she owned. This wasn't hers, or if it was something I had never seen before. I took a deep breath, gripping the fabric between my fingers. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe she had bought new lingerie and just never worn it for me. Maybe. No. I was done making excuses. I walked into the house, my heart pounding. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing in the world was wrong. Mary. She looked up, smiling. Yeah. I tossed the underwear onto the coffee table. Whose are these? The blood drained from her face so fast I thought she might pass out. She stared at them, then back at me. Where did you? They were in your car. She swallowed. Hard. Her lips parted, then closed. Then, suddenly, she let out a weak chuckle. Oh my God, David, you scared me. I frowned. Scared you? She nodded quickly. They must have fallen out of my gym bag. I bought a few new pairs of underwear and had them in my bag when I was changing after a workout. Maybe they slipped out, and I didn't notice. I narrowed my eyes. So, you're telling me they've been sitting under your seat for how long? She shrugged. I don't know. A few days? Maybe weeks? I've been meaning to clean out my car. I clenched my jaw. It was an excuse, one she had clearly thought of quickly. But it was plausible enough that I had no hard proof to counter it. I exhaled slowly. And the laundry? She furrowed her brows. What about the laundry? The smell? I said, my voice like steel. Your clothes. They smelled like cologne. She blinked, then tilted her head. David, are you serious? Dead serious. She sighed, rubbing her temple. I borrowed a coworker's jacket a few days ago when I spilled coffee on mine. It must have rubbed off. I washed my clothes, and I guess the scent stuck. I wasn't thinking about it. Her explanation was smooth, practiced, almost too perfect. But I had backed her into a corner, and she was clawing her way out any way she could. I stared at her for a long time, searching for any crack in her story. But she just looked back at me, wide-eyed, pleading. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to so badly. But deep down, I knew the truth. She was lying. Again, I swallowed the lump in my throat and took a step back. All right. She frowned. All right. I nodded. Let's say I believe you. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. David, But if I find out you're lying to me, I interrupted, my voice low. This is over. She inhaled sharply. I swear, I'm not lying. I didn't respond. Instead, I turned and walked upstairs, leaving her sitting there in silence. She might have dodged this one, but she wouldn't get away forever. Part 4. It had been a few weeks since our last confrontation, and things between Mary and me had settled into an eerie, fragile normalcy. She continued acting as if nothing had changed, as if she had explained everything away and I had bought it. I let her believe that, but in my heart, I knew better. The way she tiptoed around me, the way her laughter felt forced, the way she'd flinch whenever I entered a room unexpectedly, it all pointed to the truth. She knew I didn't believe her. And then, it happened. One evening, I came home from work, exhausted from a long day, and headed to the bathroom. As I reached for the towel, my hand knocked something off the counter. I bent down to pick it up, expecting it to be one of Mary's endless bottles of lotions or face creams. It wasn't. It was a pregnancy test. A positive pregnancy test. The world tilted. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the two bold lines on the little plastic stick. My mind went blank for a moment, then roared back to life in a chaotic swirl of disbelief and rage. Mary and I had stopped trying for a baby over a year ago. We had agreed to wait until things were more stable, and in all our years together, she had never once gotten pregnant. Until now. My blood ran cold. I clutched the test in my hand and stormed out of the bathroom. Mary was in the kitchen, humming softly as she stirred a pot on the stove. She turned at the sound of my footsteps, her smile faltering when she saw my face. "David?" she asked, her voice uncertain. I held up the test. "What is this?" Her eyes darted to the stick in my hand, and in that moment, I saw it. The panic, the sheer, unfiltered terror flashing across her face before she forced it away, replaced it with something else. Something practiced. "David, I was going to tell you," she said, her voice unnaturally soft. "When..." My voice was deadly calm. "Before or after the baby was born." She took a step toward me, hands raised like she was trying to soothe a wild animal. I just found out myself." I laughed, but it was hollow. "And you expect me to believe that?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She was scrambling, searching for a way to spin this, a way to slip through the cracks like she had before. But this time, there was no way out. I shook my head. "You can't talk your way out of this one, Mary. We haven't been trying. We haven't even." I stopped myself, my stomach turning at the realization. We hadn't had sex in weeks. She knew it too. Her breath hitched, her entire body stiffening. The color drained from her face. "David," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, just listen." "Listen to what?" I snapped, my control finally breaking. "To more lies? To more excuses?" "No. No more, Mary. Tell me the truth." She started shaking her head, her hands gripping the edge of the counter like she needed something to hold on to. I don't know how this happened." I let out a bitter laugh. "Really? You don't know?" She pressed her fingers to her temples, squeezing her eyes shut. Maybe it's yours." I felt something inside me snap. "Are you serious? You're really standing there, looking me in the eye, and saying that?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. She had nothing. No more justifications, no more excuses. Nothing. Her silence was deafening. And then, just like that, the dam broke. Tears welled up in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks as she let out a shaky sob. "David, I'm so sorry," she choked out, her voice breaking. "I never meant for this to happen." I stared at her, the woman I had once loved more than anything, the woman I had built my life around. And I felt nothing but cold, unrelenting fury. "How long?" I demanded. She sniffled, wiping at her face. "A few months." "A few months," I repeated, my voice hollow. "And who is he?" She hesitated, and that was all the answer I needed. I turned away, running a hand through my hair, trying to process the wreckage of my life. My wife was pregnant with another man's child. Everything I had fought so hard to protect, everything I had believed in, was gone. Mary took a shaky step toward me. "David, please. I still love you." I whirled around to face her. "Love?" I spat. "You don't get to say that to me. You don't destroy someone you love." Her sobs grew louder, but I couldn't bring myself to care. The woman standing in front of me wasn't the Mary the first had married. That Mary had died the moment she let another man into her bed. I turned toward the door. "I'm done." "Wait," she gasped, reaching for me. But I stepped back. David, we can fix this. We can. I cut her off with a look. No, Mary. You can't fix this. You killed us. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. I had never seen her look so broken, so desperate. But there was no sympathy left in me. Not anymore. As I turned and walked away, I heard her whisper one last plea. Please, don't leave me. But I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. Her perfect little world was crumbling around her, and for the first time, she had no way to stop it. Part 5. I didn't stop walking that night. I didn't look back, didn't second-guess my decision. Mary had made hers the moment she betrayed me, and now it was my turn. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this unscathed. She had shattered my life, and I was going to make sure she felt every last piece of it cutting into her. The next morning, I met with a divorce attorney. He listened as I laid everything out, the cheating, the lies, the pregnancy. When I was done, he leaned back in his chair and let out a long whistle. You've got a strong case, David. We can go after her hard. That's exactly what I want, I said, my voice cold. I don't want her walking away from this with anything. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I moved out of the house, refusing to stay in a place that had been defiled by her betrayal. I stayed with a friend while I put the next steps of my plan into motion. First, I listed the house for sale, our house, the one we had built our lives in. Mary had begged to stay there, pleaded with me to let her keep it. I refused. I paid for this house, I told her. It was never yours to begin with. She sobbed, but I didn't care. The house sold quickly, and Mary had no choice but to pack her things and leave. She had nowhere to go, her family refused to take her in after learning what she had done, and none of her so-called friends wanted to be associated with her. The man she had cheated with? He vanished the moment he found out she was pregnant, leaving her to fend for herself. But I wasn't done. I made sure everyone knew the truth. I told our families. I told our mutual friends. I even told her workplace, forwarding them proof of her affair with her colleague. It turned out her company had a strict policy about workplace relationships, especially ones that involved deception and misconduct. She lost her job within days. Her reputation was in ruins. The whispers followed her wherever she went. The looks of pity, the hushed conversations that ended the moment she walked into a room. She had built a life of lies, and now she was drowning in them. I wasn't finished yet. The divorce was brutal. I had gathered enough evidence to prove her infidelity beyond a shadow of a doubt, and the court saw right through her crocodile tears. She walked away with nothing, no house, no savings, no assets. The judge even ruled that she owed me a significant sum in legal fees. She was broke, alone, destroyed, and I still wasn't done. I reached out to the man she had been with, just to see what kind of coward he really was. As expected, he wanted nothing to do with her. He blocked her on everything, refused to take responsibility, and even denied the baby was his. Mary was completely and utterly abandoned. One day, I got a call from her. I let it go to voicemail, but when I listened, all I heard was soft crying before she finally spoke. I have nowhere to go, David. I lost everything. Please, I just need. I deleted the message before she could finish. The last time I saw her was outside the courthouse. She looked like a ghost of the woman I had once loved. Hollow. Defeated. She tried to speak to me one last time, her voice hoarse from crying. David, please. I stared at her for a long moment. Once, I would have given anything to see her happy. Now, I felt nothing. You did this to yourself, I said. Her lips trembled, but she didn't argue. She knew I was right. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there in the cold. Revenge had never been part of who I was, but Mary had made me into something new. Something hardened. She had taken everything from me, and I had made sure she lost everything in return. I moved on. I rebuilt my life. It wasn't easy, but with time, I found peace. I traveled, reconnected with old friends, and eventually found someone who truly valued loyalty. I learned to trust again, but I would never forget the lessons Mary had taught me. Mary, on the other hand, faded into obscurity. No job, no home, no friends. Last I heard, she was staying in a rundown apartment, struggling to make ends meet. She had reached out to me once more, but I never responded. She was nothing to me now. As I drove away from the courthouse that day, a weight lifted from my chest. I was free. Free from the lies, free from the pain. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I would never look back, and neither would she. As the months passed, I occasionally heard whispers about Mary's struggles. She had tried to find work, but her ruined reputation followed her everywhere. Friends who once adored her turned their backs, unwilling to associate with a woman who had destroyed her own marriage. She had no one left to manipulate, no one left to deceive. At one point, she tried reaching out to a few of our old mutual friends, begging for help. None of them gave her a second chance. They knew the truth. They knew what she had done. It was poetic justice. I found happiness again. It took time, but I built something real, something strong. Love, trust, and loyalty, everything Mary had taken for granted, I found again in someone who truly deserved it. And as for Mary, she became nothing more than a ghost of my past. She had gambled and lost everything. And I had won. The end.